Your father and your mother, like, how did they, deal with what you as a child and the kids were reporting,
Oh,
seeing entities and that
man.
sort of
When you see a sibling sitting on the ground eating potato chips and he launches in the air and heads head first towards a wall, I mean, you gotta kinda realize at some point that something's going on.
Thank you for having me on my show, and thank you for being with thank you for being here.
They didn't want us to think about anything that could penetrate our ability to move as a unit and have a strength, like a force field around us. So having encounters with ghosts showed a sign of weakness. There's this tall 6'5" soldier that walks toward me from the foyer towards the front door and then disappears into the right side to the dining area. So
Mm.
I was like, wow, there's a house full of ghosts, like just living.
If you like today's content, please like, subscribe, comment down below, and of course, you can find the video interview on youtube.com/paranormalpop. Welcome to this edition of Coffee and UFOs. My guest is Marie Jackson, a paranormal investigator from Kansas City, Missouri. Marie, how are you?
I'm doing wonderful. Thanks for having me, Alan.
Thank you for having me on my show, and thank you for thank you for being here.
Thank us for
Um,
having each other.
yes, yes, we're just grateful to have other people of kindred spirit and interests that we share. And we were earlier before talking about how when we have these conversations, sometimes we kind of go in circles and that sort of thing. But how do you feel about getting together and talking to people about the paranormal? I mean, does it ever get boring to you?
No, it's so interesting having these conversations because it's a never-ending conversation for me. I could talk about it all day, mainly because I went through it, and being able to share my experience and just have that dialogue with other people and to try to analyze things that are not considered the norm is very
Mhm.
intriguing to me. So whenever I have an opportunity to have these conversations, I jump all over it. I love it. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, and you had early exposure when you were a child.
Yeah, I had that firsthand exposure, and I was 4 when I had my first paranormal encounter. 4 years old, and you would think a child at that age is not able to have a discernment of what they're experiencing, but
Mhm.
me and my mother and father had 9 kids. I'm the middle child out of 9 children,
Mm.
and we lived on the south side of Kansas City, and we were very active, very sheltered children. My father was the only child. He wanted a big family, so we had he was very stern with everything that went on in the house. Anything that took place, it always had to go through my father, and whatever he said and felt was what stood. So we were very observant kids and very, very wise. He would give us like reading materials at the age of 3 and 4, where we would sit and watch VHS tapes all day about alphabets and colors. So we were well advanced before our time when we eventually got into elementary school. We were like ahead of the game. But that's just
And
how
you're
my father
you're
groomed
middle
us.
child.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
you're
I'm the
middle
middle.
child. You're extra
Yeah.
smart.
The middle child, they're usually the ones that hold the torch in the family, the pillar of the
Yeah.
family.
Well,
Yeah.
it's funny, so you say you hold the torch 'cause it's kinda like shining a light into the dark, right? And, like, that's what you do. Like, you
Literally.
can see it. Yeah, exactly. And now your father, you know, and your mother, like, how did they, deal with what you as a child and the kids were reporting,
Oh
seeing entities and that
man.
sort of
Yeah, my mother was very submissive to my father's word.
thing?
So if he said the sky is black, then she's like, I guess it is.
Mhm,
So we told my mother. I mean, it wasn't like it was something that they didn't know was going on. They both were very aware of what was happening. But my mom, she was so submissive to my dad's word and how he felt that we never had a voice. So I would run and tell my mother things, or I would try to sneak and tell my mother things,
mhm.
and it was dismissed. It was like, "Oh, go lay down. You're making it up. You guys are joking around. You're not experiencing anything. Your brother pushed this brother." And it was so many of us to the point where you could almost assume that we were picking on one another. But that wasn't the case. You know, when you see a sibling sitting on the ground eating potato chips and he launches in the air and heads head first towards a wall, I mean, you got to kind of realize at some point that something's going on outside of us just normally playing like children, and
Right.
was always dismissed.
And you all saw this happen.
Yes, yes.
Your brother was like,
Brothers,
was he
yeah.
was he hurt? Was he like what happened?
Yeah, he didn't get injured, and I remember the day so clear. I was standing there. I didn't want to eat because I had been going through some physical encounters with the entities, and it was right after I got my head injury, and one of them pushed me off, and I went to the hospital and got 8 stitches across my head, and I still have the scar to this day. So when he launched in the air, I was sitting in the living room, and I didn't want to eat because I was depressed, and they were calling me Frankenstein because of my scar, and it was just so horrible. And then my brother, he was just sitting on the ground, and he launched and his shoulder hit the door of the garage, so he fell right there. He didn't get injured. There wasn't any blood or anything, but he was definitely shaken up. Like it was, he was scared, crazy. He
Gotcha.
was freaked out.
Yeah, I think anybody would, right? Like
Yeah.
that's intense,
Yeah.
and that's the stuff that you hear from the movies. Why is it? Do you think? Because you are a paranormal investigator, why is it? Do you think that we hear these stories? You experienced it, but it's never ever captured on camera or security cameras. I mean, we've seen some like interesting, I think, phenomena
Yeah.
on camera, but as far as like human beings like physically being affected, I, unless you're aware of something I'm not, I think it's a pretty rare thing to
Yeah.
occur.
To actually see the footage and the documented evidence of these encounters,
Yeah.
it's almost like it's a taboo thing to surface, like just with ufology, just with um extraterrestrial sightings.
Hmm.
They give you tad bits of information letting you know that there is something, going on, but they don't want to let you know and indulge you with everything because they want to
Right.
have a sense, at least I believe that they want to maintain a sense of control, especially when
Hmm.
religion is a factor and there's so many conflicting um, components when it comes to religion and cultural aspects. So I think that they sheltered and just kind of covered up a lot of these occurrences because they don't want to overwhelm the public. I mean, if you start unleashing all of this information and this evidence to the public, most people have their own religious, denomination and religious beliefs. This will be overwhelming for them. So, I think they're like, let's show them something interesting, but not tell them that this is real and this is the encounter that, accompanies it.
Right.
It would
Right.
be manic. It would be crazy. People wouldn't know
Yeah.
how to
I
handle
mean,
it.
I think it's funny you say that. I think it would actually be worse if it were something like what happened to your brother, caught on camera and people saw this. I think it would scare them even more because now we're talking about the potential of demonology or
Yeah.
evil spirits, and I think that's scarier than the idea of like an extraterrestrial coming down and taking a peek at us and that sort of thing. Um,
Yeah.
I guess I just don't understand why do they know if they're being filmed? Does a ghost know if they're on camera? Like, how do they know to not get caught doing these things?
It's so funny because, and it's so interesting that you asked that question because a lot of paranormal investigators, when they go into these locations that have reports of a lot of activity or occurrences or presence, their
Mhm.
devices lose a lot of energy. Like if they have a K2 meter or if they are using their cell phones or their cameras, these energy forces are magnetic to energy. So they're draining these devices. So if you ever look up any paranormal investigation where a person has lost their battery life on their device, that is a real thing. And I really feel this is kind of interesting and awkward, but at the same time, this is UFOs and coffee. So I really feel like that these energy forces are becoming more sophisticated with how we're
Mm.
using this new technology and how we're using it to capture the evidence. Um, I really think that they're picking up on this new concept of investigation. and it's so interesting, but they're starting to be more familiar with how we're using our technology and our devices, and they're manipulating them. Like, they have the ability to manipulate things. Like, I've gone on several I've done over 112 investigations, and the investigations that I've gone on, a majority of them I have to pack extra batteries, because I'm like, as soon as I get here, it's going to drain my battery. It happens just about every time. So, but it's very interesting, and I'm doing more research into it to see, like, what could be the contributing component to that. 'Cause
That's
gotta be more to it.
yeah, yeah, that's interesting. I'd love to hear, someday what your findings are, what you suspect. Because I think one way you can look at that too, because there's always this skeptical side of it. I tried to, conceive of. Um, and I think that if people challenge you, I think the best thing you can do is to say, when have you ever suddenly lost power in your
Mhm.
batteries in anything
Yeah,
in your lifetime? When have you ever just suddenly put fresh batteries in and then boom,
just
it's gone?
drains.
I
Yeah.
I for me, never. Like, it's never happened.
No.
Um, but then the paranormal investigations, it's ubiquitous. It happens
Yeah,
everywhere, it seems like.
yeah, it does. Yes, it does, and, yeah, it's just like the standard code. Whenever you go do an investigation, bring extra batteries. Like, that's the standard etiquette of any
Checklist like
investigation.
101, right?
Paranormal investigating for dummies, bring extra batteries.
Because otherwise, what's the point? Um, so what you saw things growing up. Now, as you were, growing and you were going through your, preteens, teens, adulthood, did your ability to see, like, waver or change at all?
Yeah, it enhanced,
Really?
and I
Mm,
always wondered if it was because of my head injury, if that magnified or activated something for me, because ever since then, after I got this massive head injury, I just
mhm,
had the ability to see them constantly. Even after we left the haunted house we were living in, my parents used to think that I was still making it up, because I would tell them that there's a man standing over in the corner. And they thought that I was still making these things up, that they believed that I was making them up, because we had already left the house and nobody was having any additional experiences. But I kept seeing things.
mhm.
So it got so bad to the point where I was just like, nobody's going to believe me. So I'm not even going to say anything. I'm not going to say that I seen a shadow go past my parents' bedroom. I'm not going to say that there was a man in the car. I'm not going to say anything, because every time I brought it up, it was just dismissed, or I was accused of making it up. So as I got older, it's just so awkward with me going places and seeing apparitions or seeing shadows, and just like, I wish I could tell somebody. I couldn't. I didn't say anything.
Well, because you would probably be deemed crazy, especially
Yeah.
as you grew up. But even when we were young, I think we were indoctrinated enough to realize, "Oh, I better not talk about this thing."
Yeah.
Otherwise, I may get locked up or, taken to, the school therapist or something. Yeah.
Yeah, straight jacket type of conversation. So,
Mhm,
and being where I'm from, and when I say where I'm from, being an African American woman in our community,
mhm.
that was like an unspoken rule. We don't talk about having encounters with ghosts. We couldn't have these conversations. It wasn't normal.
Why was it taboo?
You said, why is that?
Mhm, why was it taboo? Yeah.
Yeah. So I've done some research as an adult to find out why these conversations were so taboo growing up, and why they didn't adopt the idea of us having paranormal encounters. And a lot of it was grouped around our back in the early days, we had these religious practices where anything outside of what we considered something to penetrate our ability to be strong, or
Mhm,
to be revered as having strength, it was kind of like dismissed. They didn't want us to think about anything that could penetrate our ability to move as a unit and have a strength, like a force field around us. So having encounters with ghosts showed a sign of weakness from what I researched. So they didn't have those discussions, and they threw a lot of religion in front of um, these reports, these encounters. They would
mhm.
say, like when we were growing up, if I remember my mom taking me to a Baptist church, and she's like, "Hey, my daughter is still seeing things. Can you help her?" And
Mm.
it got reversed. They were telling my mom, well, it's because of you she's having these fits, and because you're not whole with yourself and going to church and you're not a member of the church, and it just got
Yeah.
flipped around. And after that, my mom was like, "I'm not going to church anymore because I know something's going on and I'm trying to get help, but you guys are not helping." So yeah, it's such a taboo conversation. And what I'm doing with my investigations is removing the stigmas that we've had in place with a lot of the things that people from where I come from, my culture, my subcultures, opening up these conversations, having this dialogue, and letting people know that yes, these encounters are normal with people that look like me, people that come from where I come from. I mean, we lived in the inner city. It wasn't like lived in a fancy house. We lived in a 900 square foot ranch style home on a concrete slab. So, having these conversations and making people understand that it's okay to tell your story. It's okay to talk about what you went through. It's okay to express what you've dealt with and not have to feel like, you're going to be judged or ridiculed or labeled or, you know, um, idolized as a person who needs some type of mental institution or some type of medication. I'm
Mhm.
changing that. And I've gotten a lot of good feedback. I had a lot of negative feedback in the beginning just because it was like a shocker. Oh my God, it's a black girl. She's paranormal investigating. Something's wrong with her. I got that a lot from
Mhm.
a
Sure.
lot of people from where I come from. They're like, something's wrong with her. And I'm like, no, something's wrong with you for not realizing that there are other things that go on in this world besides what we are told is the version of truth. So,
Mhm.
yeah, I'm removing that label of us not having being able to have those conversations from these communities of people so we can open up these conversations more and not just be so timid to talk about it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, earlier when you were saying they, like, do you mean like early civil rights activists or before that?
Um Prior to that, yeah, I'm talking about like antebellum era, like during that era. Yeah, they would have these a lot of people in the South. They practice voodoo. If you're familiar with voodoo, they have a lot of
Mhm,
those ritualistic ways that they either invite certain energies as a form of protection, or they use them as a form of like a shield or like a weapon. So
mhm.
it's still heavily acknowledged in the South, but if you transition to like the Midwest and the Northeast and the West Coast, they don't adopt those practices. So it's kind of like, it's not a normal conversation to have unless you're from the South. Um,
Yeah. Well, a friend of mine, Camille, she grew up in New Orleans, and she was exposed to all kinds of different things. She had, two parents, one white, one black, and New Orleans, surrounded by Christianity, voodoo, Santeria, all these different
Yeah,
things, and like, but then you're right, you go into different regions, and the sense of what is accepted, and this is true of anywhere. Um, it changes.
yeah,
If you go to certain parts of the South, if you talk about aliens, suddenly you're talking about demons. It's like,
yeah,
"What?
yeah,
No, we're not sure." Like, "Oh, but
yeah.
the Bible says
Let's
so
talk
and so,"
about
and I'm like,
that.
"No, no, that's what it is." Um, so, okay, so why is that? Or is that why we don't see, so many African American, faces on television,
Yeah.
online, or even, like, in ufology, one thing, I guess I'm asking 2 questions. So, uh, one thing I always get really frustrated with is, and I ask a lot of people on the show, and I've yet to get, like, a satisfactory answer, is is, you hear about the, Nordic aliens, right?
Mhm.
Tall, blonde hair,
Yeah,
blue eyes. You hear about the Greys.
yeah.
Okay, so Greys are not exactly like Anglo-Saxon white people, but still, light color, skin. And I think there's one called the Arcturian, I forget, but it's a darker
Um,
skin.
the is it the the
N
Octuri? I know which one you're talking about. It's
Yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
darker ones.
Right, but that's the only one of, like, all these various, extraterrestrials that are reported that has a dark color skin, right? And then
Yeah.
and then and then we also get the Anglo-Saxon, which is legit like just a white human.
Yeah.
But considering the human race evolved, out of Africa, right? Like, if there are ancient aliens in this whole history, like, why aren't we seeing these other colors? And
Yeah.
it's so bizarre to me, I always found.
Yeah, just how over time the the like with Christianity and other religions, they have a depiction of what they want you to see as far as who the derivatives of these individuals are, like Christ and
Yeah.
their disciples, and they come in one version. Like they're all in just this one version of color. And if you do more research, you realize and you find out that, okay, actually, this is the version that is taught in this region of the world, and this is the version that is taught in this region of the world. Why are
Mhm,
they so, just different? Why do they look so distinct in physicality? And
mhm,
I think that just also with what like I was saying in the beginning, what they want us to be comfortable with. They want a certain demographic, or they want a certain representation for, and a certain label for what we see and what we believe is truth, to have a certain appeal, so that
mhm,
way we can see it in a certain format. And I saw that shift even when I was younger. I saw that shift of um, presentation of what certain societies of people want us to see over time. And I think that also, with even with extraterrestrials, that factors into that presentation of what they want us to believe is a version of truth, because they want us to
mhm,
see certain things in a certain format to make people comfortable with what they're told, and what what they see, I
sure,
guess, if I'm
yeah.
making sense. But
No, it does. It's like Jesus, like you said, right? I mean, in all
yeah.
likelihood, Jesus did not have light brown hair and blue eyes. No,
And then you have
like,
this picture, and this is
right.
all that is presented. But then other
But then
areas, they're like, yeah, that he's got wool hair and he's darker in complexion, and it's like, okay, but they, whoever they are,
yeah.
want us to see this version because this might make the majority comfortable with
Oh,
the
okay, so when you
presentation.
say okay, so when you're saying, like, when people talk about screening, like, so you have this experience, you're seeing something, and they, meaning the aliens, are controlling what you see. Is that what you're saying?
Um,
Or do you mean
That was
society?
more so society that I was
Okay,
referring to. But
gotcha.
that's a really interesting point that you make, because just like how I told you that these energy forces can be very manipulative in what your version of what you can see and another person's version of
Mhm,
what they're able to see. I really wholeheartedly believe that is true. I believe that they can manipulate our minds and manipulate our subconscious to where we're seeing a certain version of um, presentation of an energy form. I keep saying the
mhm,
word energy, and I say this a lot, even when I'm conversing with other people, even with my investigations, because it keeps the titles of religion out of it when I'm talking about energies. Energies with my investigations are, I classify them in levels: energy one, two, three, and four. And energy one is more of the ghost that might be present but doesn't necessarily have physical interaction with a human. And then there's
mhm,
energy twos that are a little bit more active, that might be able to move things around. Then there's energy threes that are much more active and might have, move things around and have more of an interaction with people. And then there's the energy fours, which I feel are much more of the manipulative forms that can manipulate you into believing that there's someone else, or in a different form. They're much more active in um, present, shall I say? And
mhm.
they if you were to label them in any type of religion, would probably be considered the demon. They would probably consider those like the demonic energies. So, but I say energy a lot because I, I use the distinction of the different types of forms of energy, because majority
Yeah.
of the paranormal encounters that people are having, these are energy forces. They're just presented with a different form of energy than what we are actually accustomed to 'em in the human form. But these energy
Mhm.
forces, they exist in certain paradigms of this world and other worlds, and they have the ability to um, interact with us just on just different platforms. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I try to just express it in that format just so other people are not like, okay, well, if you're calling it a ghost, isn't that significant to this origin of religious discussion? And I just try to
Mhm.
stray away from that because it opens up a Pandora's box of religious conversation.
Yeah, okay, so a thought just came into my mind too. Um, so, I've spoken to, like, Shane McCallum, who was a host of, Q Files podcast, and, him and Laurie Gum, some years ago, started doing paranormal investigations, and he realized that, because and they're gay, right? Gay and lesbian, and they walk into a place, and they started addressing their approach from that perspective of
Mhm.
being a gay person and connecting, and they found that these spirits or ghosts or whatever they were, because they're gay too, they finally found someone who can, like, kind of understand them and where they're coming from, and there was, like, a certain a communication that was opened up. Now, do you think that that
Huh.
would be true with,
Hmm.
like, a black woman walking into a space and an antebellum black woman or earlier, right? Um,
Yeah.
whose spirit is lingering would more likely relate to you than it would to me if I walked into the space and tried to communicate. And have you found that to be
Wow.
true?
I haven't found that to be 100% true, but I cannot necessarily rule out that being a possibility.
Mhm,
I think the energy form and the mindset of it, how it existed prior to it transitioning over into that full energy force, might be more of a contributing component of how it interacts with someone.
mhm,
Or just how they were in their prior life, the human life. How were they? What were they most encountering, and just the dynamic of their overall existence. I don't think necessarily it's swaying one way to the other with the physical, if you're black or if you're gay. I
mhm.
haven't read that deep into it to find out if there is a connection. I'm definitely going to do some more research to see if there's anybody that has reported and
Yeah,
done any investigations with that, or compiled any information or documentation on that. But
yeah.
it would be interesting to know. I know a lot of times people say, "Oh, I feel like it's a black person that's connecting with me," and it might
Mhm.
very well be. Then again, it might very well be the ancestor of a white slave owner. Or something.
Yeah, I guess the counter to that would be, well, men and women, psychic mediums, intuits, go out there and communicate with the opposite sex all the time, so there's no seems to be no, differentiation, on communication based on that, descriptive.
Yeah,
So, but I think it's an interesting thing to consider. I had not
yeah.
considered it until I spoke to Shane. Um, and but for you, do you consider yourself a psychic medium?
You know, I I have been labeled as a psychic, and
Mhm,
I don't actually consider myself to be a psychic, because the connection of being a psychic is more of the telepathy, being able to communicate and talk, and
mhm,
um, had those spiritual conversations and foresee things and things like that. I have the ability to see an apparition, but I can't sit and have a conversation with it, or it tell me what's going on or who I need to connect to. I think that is much more of an intimate telepathy type of connection when you're more of a psychic medium. But
mhm.
if I was to walk, I consider myself to be a pendulum. I call
I
myself
was
the
gonna
black
ask.
pendulum.
Or I was gonna ask about.
I call myself the black pendulum, because I have that pendulum is the balance between the energy forms, and I'm
Mhm,
the balance between the energy form and the human form as well as the spirit form. I have that detection, like that detector. So if I walk into a property or I walk up to a property, I can tell you automatically what type of energy forms that are there and that are in your in your home or on the property or on the land or around the area. I can tell you because I get these vibrations that are very strong. And then not only do I get the vibrations that are very strong, I can see the apparitions in their actual form, whether it's the dark shadows or it's just the silhouette of a man. Like I tell you, if it's a man, can't always see the actual face of the apparition or the energy form, but I can see the silhouette to tell you, okay, this is an older man or an older woman or a child, and I
Mhm.
can give you more description based on that. So the best piece of equipment I take with me when I do any investigation is myself. I am the best equipment, piece of equipment.
Yeah.
I am the K2 major.
No, that's really interesting. Because I was just involved in a documentary called Sounds of the Dead, EVP, and through that process, and then you know, following conversations, particularly on this on coffee and UFOs too, that this idea had kind of come up where the person like you is the component that makes the equipment work. So like you're going in with your EVP, with your recording device, um, and you're hoping to get an EVP. But if you are not in tune, if you're not able to connect to some degree to the other side, you may never pick up anything on the EVP. I don't know if that's true or not, but or you're more likely to pick up more because the person in the space is, you know, pendulum. Is there an adverb for that?
Pendulum.
Penduluming? I
Yeah.
don't know.
If it's not,
Yeah.
we're gonna coin it today.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I think just with me being in multiple investigations, I've always found that I am a magnet to energy forms, and
Right.
it's like I attract them. And like I I have a house that I live this house that I live in actually I did an investigation on, and I didn't really want to do it on my house because I didn't want my kids to get freaked out, and I just kind of try to keep that away from the home. But I was like, I have to do it. I have to do it on my house. So I already know that there's a man, there's a woman, there's a child that's in my bathroom, and the woman and the child they stay in my left closet. The man stays in my latrine, I guess you can call it, over to the right,
Okay.
and they walk around. The man is an energy two form, and the other two are just energy ones, and they're in my closet. So, but it's like I'm so magnetic to them, and then they'll come and they'll stand around my bed, like they're hovering over me, and I'll feel them, and I'll turn around and I'll see them standing, and it's just I'm so used to it. It doesn't bother me as as it would someone else if they rolled over and they could see someone standing there.
Yeah. So I get it doesn't drain your battery.
No, it doesn't drain. The only time it drains me is when I'm encountering an energy 3 or energy 4. Be because something about they drain a lot of energy. They drain a lot of my energy. The most recent investigation I did was at the Sally House. Have you ever heard of the Sally House? It's in
Mhm.
Kansas. And I went with a couple of guys that Sam and Kobe. They do a lot of investigations, and they found me and they invited me out to the Sally House to do an investigation. So when I went there, I could automatically detect that there was energy force there in the basement and upstairs. I had this massive headache, and I can't stay too long in locations that have these strong energies because it does actually drain my energy. So I have to be very careful with implanting
Right.
myself in these environments because it can drain me.
In your investigations, what have you seen um, that has convinced you that there is really another life beyond this life, that your spirit can continue on? Because we hear oftentimes that people think that these are like residual echoes of our consciousness or
Hmm.
something like that. Have you seen anything that you're like, you know what? There's life after death.
Yeah. I mean, I could say that for even when I lived in the haunted house growing up. There's definitely life after death. One investigation that I will never forget, it was in South Carolina at a house that was owned by William McCorkle, who was one of the lead of the, what was he in? He wasn't in the Union. He was what's the other military? Nevertheless,
Confederates.
Confederate, thank you. He was the lead Confederate soldier. He owned a house in South Carolina, and
Mhm,
it was actually a location where they would come and pull their buggies in, and then they
mhm,
would go in and they would have tea, and then there were some soldiers that actually lived in the house, and there were slaves, and there's a giant tree on the outside of the house that they used to hang slaves from. And I actually went to this house to do an inspection because I'm a claim adjuster, so I inspect properties for storm
okay,
damage. So
mhm,
the irony of my life. So I went there to do a home inspection, and then
mhm,
I noticed that there was a woman standing in the window, and she was just staring at me. And this face I could see very clear, very very clear.
yeah,
At that point, I was like, oh gosh, this house is haunted. So I'm walking up to the house, and the lady comes out and she's like, "What are you looking at?" And I said, "Nothing. I'm not looking at anything." And then I looked over at the tree. It's a massive, beautiful, beautiful tree. And
yeah,
then I was like, "This house is very interesting." She said, "Oh, it has a lot of history. We've had paranormal investigators come here. It's been all over the news." And I was just like, "Interesting." And I said, "I'm actually a paranormal investigator. That's actually my full-time thing. I'm
mhm.
an inspector for work." So she was so excited and she wanted to start telling me everything. And she's like, "You want to investigate my house?" And I said, "I mean, I'm here. So why not kill two birds with one stone?" So I told her,
Well, how convenient is that?
yeah. So I'm feeling all these energies. I'm starting to feel energy force. I'm getting a little headache, and then I feel energy. I'm feeling like every kind of energy level that you could possibly think of.
Sure,
So
yeah,
she's wanting to indulge me with everything, and I'm like, please don't tell me anything. Don't tell me anything about your house. Don't tell me anything. Just let me go in, and I'll tell you what I see, and we can connect back afterwards. So when I went to this house, I started doing my rotation around the house because I'll go and I'll look at all the windows and then I'll look in all the doors and I'll just kind of feel the vibrations of the land. And then I'll go into the house. So I saw the woman in the window very clear. I saw her face, I saw her silhouette, I saw what she was wearing. And I walked around the backyard and I said, "Oh my gosh, there's a lot of buried back here. I could feel it. Like it was the most interesting house ever." So I go around the back of the house, and there's probably about 2 acres of land that goes all the way back. And I go around to the left side of the house, and I'm like, there's a lot going on with this property. There's a lot going on. So I eventually go into the house. I walk in, there's a little boy that runs right past me. I said, "Oh my gosh, this house has a lot of activity going on with it." The little boy runs past me. He's got overalls on. And then there's this tall 6'5" soldier that walks toward me from the foyer towards the front door and then disappears into the right side to the dining area. So
mm,
I was like, wow, there's a house full of ghosts, like just living, like
yeah.
just just like their home.
Are
So
so they were living, like, functioning as if they were
yeah,
still
like they're still
alive.
alive. So
Mhm,
I'm just taking a mental note of everything. And I said, there's a soldier, there's a woman upstairs, there's a little boy that just ran past me. And then I walk up the stairs, the stairs are left of the foyer. And then there's a
mhm,
woman standing upstairs crying. I said, oh my gosh, this is a whole house. It's like a family, or it's almost as if like it's still active how it was prior to the new generation of people getting in there. So I'm
mhm,
just taking a note of it. And then once I've collected all of the rooms where I saw people in it, and oh my gosh, the baby that was crying and the lady that was just crying. Oh gosh. So I go back to the insured because she wasn't insured. And I sit her and her husband down and I say, "Okay, do you guys want to talk about what I seen?" And I said, "There's a very active house. It's almost like they're living here and they may not even realize that they're dead. And I could see them so vividly. Their faces. This is the first time I've actually seen faces, like so clear. So I sit down and I talk to her and her husband, and I start telling them, what I started seeing. The little boy that was running around, he actually went and stood next to her. And I just started indulging her with everything that I found when I was walking around the house. And I said, there's a baby that was crying, and there's a woman that was crying. It was a black woman with a wrap on her head, and she was dressed in like a sack clothing, kind of like the real baggy ones from back in the maybe the early 1800s.
Mhm.
And I was just explaining to her, I said, there's a woman and she's crying. And it's a baby that she's crying, and there's something to do with a baby. There's a baby that I keep hearing crying. There's a little boy that's running around the house. There's a tall soldier that is walking through the foyer, and he disappeared into the dining room. Then there's a lady that just stands in the window upstairs in front of the window, and then she just turns around and she vanishes. I said, so tell me what you guys know about the house. So the lady freaks out. She said, this is the first time anybody has been 100% correct about what's in the house. She told me about the soldier that stays in the foyer, and
Mhm.
he actually fell over the balcony and broke his neck, and they buried him in the backyard,
Oh my
and he
gosh.
was drunk. So I was like, okay. And he was almost 6'5". He was really tall. And they were like, yeah. And he got
What,
buried in the
so
back
you
of the
you
house.
picked up on all that detail?
Would you say?
You picked up on all that?
Yeah, I picked up on everything. So her and her husband were like, "Oh my God," they were the Heinzes, Hiein, and I'll never forget it because it reminded me of ketchup.
Yeah.
So they were like, "You're the first person that has ever been spot on with what we're dealing with." There is a little boy, and he runs around the dining room. He runs all over the house, and he stays back here. They had this back area that was a remodel area that they added on, and it had it's kind of like a back closed in patio, I guess you can say,
Mhm.
or maybe a den area. So they said he runs around that area, and then she said there's a woman, a slave woman, that was raped by one of the soldiers, and she had a baby. And when they found out that the baby was by a white guy, they end up taking the baby, breaking the baby's neck in the house,
Oh
and
god.
choking the slave woman to death in the house and buried them in the backyard. So that's why I kept seeing the woman crying. And then there was the baby crying. And then the lady that was upstairs was one of the she was one of the wives, and the the funny thing about her is she was one of the wives of William McCorkle's sons. And she was kind of like messing with some of the slaves, the male slaves, and she got caught. One of the male slaves got killed, and then they killed her as well. They hung her on the tree in the front of the house, and her name was Elva, which is my middle name. And her birthday is the same birthday as mine. So I was freaked out when she showed me the history of William McCorkle's family. And she said, the lady that you were seeing, and she showed me her picture. And I said, that's the woman I saw upstairs. Her name is Elva, and her birthday is May 28th. I said, well, my middle name is Elva, and my birthday is May 28th. So it just got so interesting. And they told me that they had so many experiences in this house.
Yeah.
One day there was a pit full of fire. They were in their bedroom, and a pit full of fire just appeared in their bedroom, went straight up to the ceiling, and then it vanished in the ceiling. And that they would have the soldier that would walk around constantly and bang on the doors, and it was just so active. So they had many investigations there, but they said when I came, I was 100% spot on with all of the energies that were in that house. So that was my most interesting one, and that's the one that led me to believe that there is definitely this existence after we pass over into this energy form.
I think so. That must have been a goosebump moment though, to have that
Oh
shared
my
name date. That's crazy, and
yeah.
maybe that's could that be a connector somehow? Something like that?
Yeah, like I don't believe in coincidences. I believe everything that I've done on my journey has been innate, and it has been organized and set up in a design for me to connect with certain people. Just the irony of me being able to have this inspection for this insured, which is so funny because the report I kept getting, I'm like, where's the address? I can't find the address. It's not coming through. And I had to go through hurdles just to get the address for this people I needed to do inspections with. And then the just the irony, the street that they lived on was the same name of the street that I lived on. So I was just Congress Street. I'm like, oh my God, this is getting weird. But I don't believe in coincidences. The house, for example, that I grew up in, when I went
Hmm.
back to try to find information about, the house and see if other people had experiences, I was overwhelmed with the amount of people that had been moving in and moving out because of the constant activity that's still ongoing. The lady that's living in the house to this day, I met her 20 years ago when I was working as an assistant manager at a thrift store, and she's living in the house that I used to live in when I was a kid.
There's another connection.
Yeah. So I'm just like, okay, everything that I'm connected to and that connects me to other people is ordained.
Yeah.
It's set up for a reason. And I just follow those leads. I just follow the leads and I follow the emotional energy stimuli, and I just proceed with it. I just don't go against the grain of it because it always takes me in the most interesting direction.
Okay, Murray, we're going to the speed round now. Um, Question: Have you seen a UFO?
Yes. Yes,
Yes.
I
And what
have.
was that like?
It was interesting. I wanted to follow it. I wanted to find out where it was going and more about it because I'm like I had already been going through things as a child. And when I seen this UFO when I was 13, I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
where is it going? What does it want? What does it want with us? It's interesting.
What did it look like? Could you see anything in
I
particular?
didn't I just it was in the daytime,
Mhm.
which I from what I hear is not very common, or is it common for UFOs to be spotted in the daytime?
Not necessarily, unless it's at a distance.
Now, this one was hovering right above me and two of my siblings and three of my friends, and we were outside with our
Mhm.
makeshift kites, and we were playing outside, and then it hovered over us, and it was circular. It was like a big circle sphere, like, and it just hovered over us, and it had these the lights were going all around the perimeter of it, and it just
Okay.
hovered and it just disappeared.
It
And I
disappeared. It didn't move out. It just
it just
vanished.
it just shifted away and then it just disappeared. So we were
Wow.
all looking at each other like, "Did you see that? Did you see that? I know I seen that. You seen it
But
too? Okay, we're not crazy."
aren't
Because
you lucky that other people saw it with you? Could you imagine if you were
yes,
by yourself?
yeah,
Yeah.
I thought just like anything else, I try to tell everybody. Then I'm like, "Okay, yep, he's activated crazy again."
All right, next question. Have you seen a cryptid?
Have I seen any what?
A cryptid.
A cryptid.
Any kind of
It's like,
monster, creature?
oh, ooh, this is interesting. I mean, it could be a cross between paranormal g-
Mhm.
energy forms and creatures. I
Sure.
definitely believe that there's a connection.
Mhm.
Can't say one way or the other if it was like a chupacabra or something like that. I haven't seen
Yeah.
anything like that.
Okay. Um, and the final and most important question of all, um, Marie, do you believe dragons are real?
Yes, I do. I most definitely
What's
do.
your what's your conception of that a dragon?
Yeah. I think they are. I've had visualizations of dragons. So dragons are like the guard dogs of the galaxies. At least I think they are. I consider myself to
Mhm.
be a spiritual gatekeeper. So whenever I visualize a dragon when I'm meditating, it's like it's protecting me from something that is to come. They're like guard dogs. So and that's
Ah,
how I look at dragons. I definitely believe they exist because I visualize them all the time.
so in the physical world or in some other dimension,
Another it's
where
in
do you?
another dimension. It's like, the dimensions I usually have dreams about are like the sky is constantly pink and velvet and
Mhm.
maroon. It's just and they're always there. It's like it's a normal existence for them. and they're constantly there and they're shifting. They're like guard dogs. They're like,
Wait, so wait, do you see them or you feel them or
I see them, I feel them. This is mainly like when I'm meditating or when I'm dreaming.
wow.
I see
So
them a
you have, like
lot.
that's amazing. I think
Oh,
because most times people think of them in terms of, something like an elemental that they might, pray not pray to, but, cast a spell to or request, help with, but you're saying you have an actual visualization of it. That's
yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah, I do. I had a whole dream about a dragon, and it was a tornado that happened, but I wasn't afraid of the weather. Like I dream about the sky so often and me flying. It wasn't
Mhm.
abnormal for me to see a tornado. So everyone's like, come on, you got to come and shelter yourself. And then here comes the dragon, and it just kind of positions itself next to me. And it was normal. It was like this is not abnormal. I'm in a completely different
Yeah.
dimension in my dream, which is amazing and it's not normal. One thing about me is when I have these dreams, I document them. I have a book of dreams that I write everything down because I feel like it's a signature to what's to come or just a connection, a conduit to another realm. So I document everything. So that way I can recall these events if another dream comes in. I'm like just connecting the dots like a puzzle.
All right. Marie, thank you so much for hanging with me.
Oh my God, you're very welcome. This is awesome conversation.
Yeah, I know, I could keep going. I'd love to. Maybe in the future, sometimes you can come back onto, Paranormal Now, and we can continue the conversation.
I am so with that. This has
Right
been
on. Alright.
great.
Awesome. So before we go, what are you working on now, and how do people find out more about you?
Yes, so I'm working on a lot. I'm actually getting ready to release a book called 10 Feet Under. It was supposed to come out in October and it's
Mhm.
self-published, but it will be getting released in March. So look up 10 Feet Under and Marie Jackson. I'm also working on developing a project with Painless Television and the Travel Channel to produce a TV show. So if you want to connect with me, you can either look up Ghostlink TV on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and you'll be able to find my pages or message me or connect to me. And that way, if you're interested in me doing an investigation, you can contact me at ghostlinktv@gmail.com and I'll do a preliminary investigation or interview with you and then check out your story.
That's great, Marie. Thank you so much.
Mhm. Yeah, you're very welcome. Thank you, Alan.
All right, and thank you for joining us for this Cup of High Strangeness with Marie Jackson. If you want to support this channel, please like, comment down below, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and please share. And of course, you can also support this channel by becoming a Patreon member, and that link is in the show notes below. As always, I appreciate you and all of your feedback, so I look forward to hearing what you have to say about this fascinating conversation with paranormal investigator Marie Jackson. Until next time, peace and love, and live in the mystery.